Very bright here. There we go.
Oh, it is very bright. Hot seat.
Exactly. So thank you very much for coming to listen to us talk about accelerators. The reason why this specific topic is that post-pandemic, accelerators are now back from hybrid mode, and there's more of them than ever. So in Europe alone, there are over 400 various accelerators. Globally, 7,000. When you think back to when the first ever acceleration program was set up, that was actually in 2005, so Y Combinator. So only in 17 and a bit years, it's completely exploded. If you are a startup founder, and we'll actually do the questions in a minute so we can gauge the audience, you probably will get invites from LinkedIn or your inbox or other places of your network to all sorts of different types of accelerators and scale-up programs. I love the one when you get the one that we had so many applications, we've extended the deadline. And I always think, really? If you have so many good quality startups and you can't work through them, why would you extend the deadline? So there's so many of them. How do you then end up actually picking one? Does it help your company? How do you vet them, etc.? So that's basically what we will be talking about today. And I'll hand it over to you, Natasha, actually, to do a proper introduction. I'll follow, and then we'll get into the topic.
Thank you, Karen. And I just want to put this in perspective. So I work for an organization which is called Reach UK. We're a part of global family of scale-up programs. I actually sometimes very consciously avoid the word accelerator because it does imply earlier stage, especially in Europe. So we are part of Second Century Ventures, which is a venture capital organization. In fact, you can look at us as the first level of AC. And when we work with our startups over the duration of 9 months, for us, this is the extended due diligence, so we can then write larger checks. So we were launched in the US back in 2008. And what makes us different is that we have a single LP, which means that we have one backer that capitalized our fund. And this backer is the largest trade association in the world. It's the National Association of Realtors. It's the organization with 1.7 million members, and it has the capitalization of 5 billion. So we were created by the real estate industry to find the tools that would drive value for the members of this organization as well as for the wider industry. So we've been operating for quite a long time. We have about 200 companies in the portfolio. And I was lucky enough to have a pleasure of working with Fyma. So we backed Fyma and Karen in our 2021 program. So we're an equity program. We do invest in our startups. And then we tend to write larger checks as Second Century Ventures after the program completed.
But you also have a background, actually, as a founder as well. So you have both the experience of setting up a company and having to build an entire acceleration program as well.
Absolutely. So I actually did start as a startup founder. I set up an electric moped company in London back in 2015. And we were looking to decarbonize last mile delivery. So we worked with the companies like Uber Eats and Just Eat. And if you find yourself in London, and if you happen to order Domino Pizza, and it would be whizzed to you on a new moped, that'll be my doing.
Cool. As already introduced, I'm the CEO and co-founder at Fyma, and we are a company that does activity analytics in the built environment. So we work with commercial real estate developers and asset owners, helping them basically figure out how many people are in their premises, occupancy, who kind of drives around their buildings, their estates, and if they change something or put up a new building or need to optimize their assets, basically, we help them give data about what's happening now and then what happens after they make those changes. And we use computer vision AI to deliver that particular value. Now, in terms of the kind of mix-up of the audience here, please raise your hand if you are a startup. Okay, quite a few. If you're an investor. If you are an accelerator. There we go, a few of you. And if you're a startup in an acceleration program right now. 1. Okay, so some work here to be done, and potentials here for more of you to be, I guess, in acceleration programs. Fyma, so we have been in 4 different accelerators in 3 years.
That was a hard sell.
So in quite a few ones. And they've ranged from absolutely abysmal to amazing. And the amazing one was the very last one that we basically participated in. When you're a really early stage company and you're trying to kind of make the most of your money, figure out where access to maybe mentorship or talent or network is concentrated and good, you would often, or I did anyway, come up and think, okay, an acceleration program would probably deliver that. So that's why we participated in a few. We have been in 1 regional one, 2 and 3 international ones. The worst one basically made us fly in to a European country, pitch there on broken equipment to a really small audience. And what they'd more or less done was being able to use a really large corporation's logo really well. But the whole point was about selling their own cloud service. That was a big disappointment, and nothing else basically came from it. And the best one was actually Reach, which is global, has presence in multiple countries, and getting into that was a real fight, basically, within the company, because we'd been to 3 acceleration programs already, one of which had been really poor, 2 had been not great. So it was always about, okay, so we put all that time in and that money and the effort in, we're probably not going to get anything back. So the bad programs that are set up just for the sake of it make it really hard for the really good ones that actually do deliver value. And then that's when I would like to actually ask you guys about how you've actually set it up. So there are obviously different types of accelerators. There are early stager ones, there are later stage ones. There are those that take equity, those that don't take any, academic ones, standalone ones, corporate backed, small cohorts, large cohorts, hybrid, remote, fully location based. Some that only last 2 weeks, some that last for years. So it's a really big kind of mix of how to actually weigh all of these things up. And with Reach, you guys are US started, and then now have presence in 7 global regions.
I think we're in every continent right now. So it did start in the US, and we actually started as a fund first. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a little bit of a trip down the memory lane. So the fund that has created Reach is called Second Century Ventures, as I mentioned. And when the National Association of Realtors was celebrating their centurion, the 100 years of existence of the organization, they wanted to enter the second century by equipping their members and the wider industry with the right technology tools, because they had a foresight back in 2008 that real estate industry will be innovated by technology. And when we talk specifics about the real estate, that industry has sleepwalked through the digitalization. When I started working for them 3 years ago, and I started talking about climate and sustainability and impact, I was looked at by my global team like I'm a flower child, which I can be. Planting trees is always a good thing. So we started as a fund first, and our first investment was a little company called DocuSign. And what they quickly realized, that writing a check is not enough. You really need to handhold the founders and explain to the industry why this technology needs to be deployed. What value does that bring? And also now, in my experience working for Reach and Second Century for 3 years, the industry and technology founders and innovators and creators, they speak different languages. Seriously, there's so much gets lost in translation that even the company like DocuSign, which we invested in Series B, they really needed help to make sure that the industry understands the value that electronic signature brings to the transactability of real estate. So we did that as a fund, and Reach was set up as more as a need to provide additional strategic and infrastructural support to the founders. So the program is quite lengthy.
It was basically to help your investment be successful,
exactly,
rather than create the pipeline to invest into in the first place.
Correct. And I think the other key thing to note, because we structured as an evergreen fund, so we recycle all the proceedings back into the fund. We're not under pressure like a traditional VC to go and raise another fund, so we're more in the camp of patient capital, and we're really hands-on. So 2013, Reach has started in the US. In 2019, they expanded to Australia, and then in 2020, they expanded to Canada and the UK. We were announced as the latest expansion territory a week before the national lockdown. So we practically created this entire ecosystem behind the closed doors.
Crazy.
It was crazy. And that was my pivot to real estate as well, from mobility. That was fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. In terms of the sizes of the companies and how much money they've raised and the valuations, can you give a little bit of a difference between US and Europe? Because that's another factor when kind of choosing on which accelerator to participate, is, are your peers on the same level of you or as you? Are they further along in their journey, or are they very much behind, in which case you probably won't learn anything?
It's a good question, and I'll start slightly differently. So we are a 9-month program. We do not believe that one size fits all. So for example, we've now backed 26 companies. We literally just announced our 3rd cohort. So the total valuation of those are $380 million. Now, the US class with 17 companies in 2022 was worth 1.4 billion. It's an entirely different bag. Companies come to us when they are at the intensive stage of growth. This is why I don't like the word accelerator, because I'll speak to a seed stage startup and they would say that they're too big for me. Which is, I understand the sentiment, but it's all about, think about your sales cycle, what is that you want from the accelerator, because we had companies who could sell on the spot in 10 minutes because their solution was like 20 pounds. And then we have some with the sales life cycle from 6 to 9 months. So a lot of value actually comes post-program, and this is where we're really strong as well. We work with our founders for the duration of about 10 years, because our ideal story is we find this fantastic startup. We would participate in every round up to an exit, because our exit comes at the liquidity event with the founder. So we're very aligned.
So I was going to ask, so how would you succeed in one? So you guys obviously have presence in multiple countries. You've seen quite a few kind of flights of companies take off. And often, I mean, the whole pitch is around come and put the effort in and you'll get value out. In the really bad accelerator case that Fyma participated in, I could have put in all the time and value in the world. They just wasn't going to come, like nothing was going to come back from there. But so, actually, let's take one step back. So in terms of how to pick one, what we looked at was, because we nearly didn't participate, we looked at references. So we went through the portfolio and I contacted people through LinkedIn and had interviews with them to validate whether what we're going to get is what it says on the tin. And that's actually the key thing why we participated. So the same way you would vet or validate your investors, accelerators is the same thing. Like all those emails that you get promising to get you to market and find you customers and network and whatever. I literally contacted people and then had interviews with them to make sure that it's something that's true. And that was what persuaded the rest of the Fyma team to be like, right, let's go for it. But yeah, so once you're in one, how do you succeed in one? How do you look at the companies in your portfolio? Like, who are the ones that actually succeed? Or how would you look at that?
It's, I'm going to give a non-answer answer. Some people say actually sometimes that I should have been in politics. You take as much as you put in, right? We can open all the doors in the world. I can put you on every stage out there. If you're unable to sell, or if you cannot squeeze every snippet of value, I probably, just don't go in one, just don't. Because the other thing that I would say, and that's kind of back to how to pick one, what's your target market? Are you targeting real estate? So there's a lot of accelerators that are sort of vertical based, like AI. AI can be applicable in any industry. Who are you selling to? Does that company, who is your growth partner, does they have the route to market? Will they help you open doors at scale? And with us, we are structured, but we're not a cookie cutter. So within this, the valuations of the company that I said, so we had at the 2022 cohort that you were a part of, the total valuation of that cohort was 200 million, 11 companies. Within that, we had companies valued at 6 through to 60. They require very different level of support. And we do, it's not only about market access, right? Because every startup goes through more or less, the same issues. You jump through the same hurdles. It's going to be team development, local market expansion, international expansion, content and marketing, exposure, and things like that. And typically, our program would start when we would sit down with our founders, and we would define what they need help with the most. And the program is hand-curated around that. So it creates a lot of work for us.
Yeah, of course.
And I was actually, so it was quite funny because we did this, we just launched our third cohort, as I said, on the 1st of March. And I was looking at the stats that everything that we've delivered for 2 cohorts before. And we've curated 500 plus meetings, and that's for 17 companies. We've delivered over 100 plus hours of knowledge transfer sessions. We participated in 20 plus international events. And we have hosted 350 our own guests at our own events. Can you imagine that? I was actually, so recently I was asked to write this, work-life balance article, and then I was doing this slide. I was like, okay, fine, that makes sense. And I've written it.
Yeah, absolutely. For us, I think that the kind of way in which we found success was around being actually really persistent. So that's something that even in the kind of poorer performing accelerators was something I still try to do. So the really abysmal one that we participated in, it didn't matter how much time I put in. The acceleration program was purely set up as a vehicle to sell cloud storage, basically. That was the whole point of it. And I think that's something to be quite wary of, because often you'll get big logos like, whatever, cloud companies or corporates doing acceleration, but what they really are trying to do behind the scenes is sell their own service, and that doesn't really deliver much value. The way we got value out of it was actually time. So time is if the accelerator has the mentors that they promise they will have, and actually has the peer group that's similar to you and you can learn from, and has a regional presence and can take you to end customers, then it's worth putting in quite a bit of time to network. And I found that post-COVID, it was literally a year out of COVID that we started this, being present and spending time face-to-face with people really helped. So we managed to get multiple paying customers out of a 9-month acceleration program. First one in the in North America as well, which is usually really difficult to do as an early stage company. We figured out who our customer is, because we'd previously only styled ourselves as an AI company. But like Natasha said, AI could be anything from like sex tech to femtech to agri-tech to whatever. So one of the reasons we were actually initially hesitant to join as well was we didn't see ourselves as a prop tech company. But once we kind of dug into it properly, we realized that a really niche accelerator that takes in only, 11 or 12 people in our class.
Typically, they take up to 10.
It's a super small class would deliver for us much more value than a big brand accelerator like Techstars or Y Combinator, which obviously everybody wants to kind of show that we went through that. But is the branding exercise worth it, or do you actually need market access? Do you need to figure out who your target market is, how to get to them, what your GTM is, and so forth? So I personally put a lot of time in. In fact, I think I did.
You spent more time on the plane than our managing partners.
Yeah, I did 80 flights last year, so actually more, 84. But that delivered value back to us as well. So that's something that I would probably point out in terms of if you're looking at the next accelerator and to participate in one is, do you have the time? And when you do, and then you can kind of vet them, and they have all of the before above mentioned elements, can you put the time into that and actually convert those mentors into people that bring value to you? And that now actually brings me to the aftercare component that you briefly mentioned as well. So Reach is now like global. You just opened LATAM.
We just opened LATAM. Mexico's just been launched. They haven't launched their first program yet, but we are now on every continent. Yeah.
Yep. And that means there's a potential for a really massive global network. And not every accelerator that says we're global is actually global. So I think it's often a branding exercise, really, again, that maybe there's a Slack channel with like 1,400 people on it, and you're meant to make your own community, and it just doesn't work. The really, really bad acceleration program we were in, they didn't even send the newsletter. Like, that was it. So we were there for 6 months as a logo on their wall, and I don't even get a newsletter now, which is quite sad.
Yeah, you're not going to get a newsletter from Reach, unfortunately. We have a fairly small team on the ground, and we're more concerned about our company's top line rather than the newsletter. And the way this program is designed, and you alluded to it a number of times, so I typically would explain that we do two things. We do access, we help our founders to access the global real estate industry, and we provide them with opportunities to exposure. And the other thing that I actually want to say, guys, that if you are participating in a program, in an industry program, I know that it may sound fluffy, but have an open mind. And I'll give you a couple of stories what we had from our first cohort. So we had a company, the FinTech, PropTech intersection, and they thought that their route to market is going to be a state agency. Well, very quickly, with a lot of focus groups, a lot of bespoke events that we have created, they figured out that their route to market is actually accountants and licenses. So that mistake could have cost them a lot more, should have they tried to discover that themselves. So that's one experience on the program. They were pre-revenue, they just raised their Series A, which we participated in. They raised 4.6 million. Hammock.
Oh, of course, yeah, they did really well.
Then we had another early stage company, super early stage. They just about raised 300K. French company, they had 2-3 people on the ground. They now sit at 3 million ARR, and they've now set up the UK team. So like the experience that you would have during the right program is going to be entirely different. So I think it's quite important to know what is that, what's the end goal, right? Have three, make sure that your growth partner knows about it. I have a colleague, who is called Paolo Riguta, who makes a super inappropriate joke.
Yes.
Whenever I think, you remember that one. So whenever we speak to the startups and we talk about how we do things, he would come and he'd say, our relationship is going to last longer than an average marriage, if you're married in London. It's super uncomfortable when someone is going through divorce.
Yeah, because I literally had divorced, I think 4 months prior, and we have this accelerator interview, and Paulo's like, our relationship's going to last longer than the average marriage in London. I'm like, okay, hopefully, because that'll be my second one. So there we go.
Yeah, so we do, 9 months, and I'm going to get back to what I said previously. Sales cycle, right? If your sales cycle is super short, your product is not particular, and you need the scale, you need the critical majority of the market, then you would drive value from day one throughout the years. If your sales cycle is longer, like 6 to 9 months, a lot of the stuff that we would work on while active in the program would actually translate into sales and into growth of top line after. So we do a lot to engage with our alumni. Now we have 17 companies, so we organize events, we put you on stage still. Karen was fantastic when she was doing the presentation on where Fyma is on the 1st of March at our event. We had about 100 people, 100 plus people event. And it's all, it all drives value, just as you said, being there, communicating within industry, giving the updates. I mean, these people are now known, the industry looks at us to deliver interesting solutions. So we're going to actually do this slightly more structured this year because our portfolio grows, the companies are fantastic, and we need to make sure that we actually drive value for them equally, not without taking any focus from the companies that are actively in the cohort. But there's a lot of, the DNA of the cohort is super important for us, and I actually want you to talk about, if I may change the seat, to talk about the potential partnership with BlockDocs, the company that we have in the cohort. So when we have companies partnering up and delivering holistic solution in terms of occupancy data and something like that, we want to shout out about it on every corner.
Yeah, which has been really, really great for us. So, yeah, and again, when I think about the entire journey and how much, that's another thing about the accelerator programs, is they can obviously, like we said, deliver value, and probably a little bit hamper your growth as well. Because in the beginning, you could go through quite a few pivots. And I don't mean pivoting from making, I don't know, a prop tech company to then starting to manufacture hardware for kitchens, not those kinds of pivots. What I
Still
mean is,
PropTech.
you could probably do that as well, yeah. But the kinds of pivots where you figure out that your market's elsewhere, or that your like with Hammock, that your buyer is actually completely different from what you thought about in the beginning. So that's why those reference calls to companies who've actually participated are really relevant to figure out that, okay, if that happens, does this mean that the support that the accelerator promised you, will that completely drop? Or will they be able to adjust and then support you further in your journey? Because a lot of this approach with the accelerators, I mean, it's 400 in Europe. I'm thinking it's just mind-boggling, but it's an average of like 14 per
I know,
country or
you're
something.
absolutely killing me. I thought I was unique.
Yeah, so it's this whole kind of spray and pray and just see standardized program. We push you through, and then see what comes out the other end. So will they be able to help you and adapt to those little kind of pivots and changes and really fast-moving ideas about who you actually end up selling to?
Actually, can I pick up on something that you said about, will they help you to adapt? How do you pick an accelerator? How do you pick like the right venture capital organization? So you've started with that, some accelerators say that we had so many applications, we decided to extend the deadline. Interesting notion. But so the makeup of the VCs, as I sometimes receive, like I'm a PropTech investor, it says clearly on my profile, PropTech investor, I receive insect bars pitches sometimes. So, I think it goes both ways. Do your research. The one thing I would say that the makeup of venture capital organizations in the US is very different to the UK. In the US, they are networkers, they're entrepreneurs. They've went through all of this, they pivoted, they're adaptable. In the UK, funny enough, we have more bankers. That they would have an entirely different vision of your business and where you need to go. Make sure that you have a very diverse set of skills in people that you start working with, VC or accelerator or two-in-one like us.
Yeah, absolutely. And one maybe not little, but one more point to go back to is, so Estonia is tiny. We are in a small, relatively small town on a global scale. But a small city in Estonia as well. And the market here is usually always too small for the companies that want to launch from here. So how do I get not just to a European market, but then a global market? And I think that's where accelerators can be super helpful, especially if they're niche and they're truly international. And I didn't really realize properly what the difference was between selling in Europe and really selling and building, not just selling, but actually building a company in Europe and building one in the US. So that's something that this particular accelerator or scale-up program really taught us because of the very small cohort. Because when you have only 10 people in your class, it means everybody can actually build up a friendship, a network, help you get into you learn about their mindset. And I did 4 trips to the US last year, 1 to Canada, and I think it was in October, and I was like, I finally figured it out, how people think here, how they pitch, how they sell, how it is just so different. And I don't think you can really get it from here or from speaking to people in Europe or reading articles. You need to really be there. So if there is an accelerator that promises you global market access and mentors, amazing if they deliver that, because the immersion, I don't think anything could have really replaced what I kind of learned out of that acceleration program throughout the whole of last year in terms of how you actually kind of raise capital and build a company there. And Fyma, which was okay to participate in the UK program, it's too small for the US one because your valuation is about 1.3 billion
valuation of which is 17 companies.
Yeah, which is crazy. But again, we can build bigger and then go and participate there. Another thing to ask about accelerators is, so if you don't get in or nearly get in, are there parts of the program that can make available to you without actually taking equity or you being in the program? So that's something I know Reach guys are doing for us, although we don't qualify for the US program because we're still too small. They will make some elements of the program available to us so that we can actually still benefit. And that means they are helping us on the journey to grow big enough to then be able to either participate or do the US market entry proper. So again, for
we do when I exit, yeah.
yeah, yeah, obviously that's the
That's
ultimate
big
goal
hopes.
for everybody, is to build it bigger and then help that. So for a if you're looking for a global accelerator, again, just to vet that definitely does happen. I just wanted to make a note as well that happy to have. Oh right, we do have a comment. So you've told me in Reach, you seem to provide a lot of value and have high ethics. Could you name some other accelerators that you think are good like you?
So since I started working for CV and we actually launched Reach, I was so blinked to real estate. I know a couple of accelerators, but so we have, if we're talking about the industry backs or the industry specifics, so there's Pi Labs, so they have an acceleration program which is about 3 months. I think the structure is kind of more or less the same. They tend to work with earlier stage companies, so a lot of companies that come out of Pi Labs accelerator, they come to us and then they go through Reach. I know, so recently I actually started engaging more with venture studios. I find this model really interesting. So I'm mentoring guys, the climate tech cohort in Zinc Venture Builder. They are, it's basically pre-idea, pre-MVP. So it's super early.
All right,
But this is also, yeah, it's an idea stage. But this is an opportunity to really sort of help this new wave of creators and innovators to create something that market actually needs. Because, I'm going to give you an interesting stat here, and probably, again, real estate too. Out of 26 companies that we worked with, only one team had real estate experience. One out of 26. The rest would, and more often than not, you would experience a problem, you would create a solution, then you would take it to market, you may generate a little bit of traction, but then you'll end up figuring out that it's actually not a problem. Or you wouldn't articulate in the right way about it. So I find it super interesting to work with venture studios because I can actually transfer the knowledge that I have and the real market need that is out there. I know that Carbon 13 just launched their venture launchpad.
Launchpad.
So that's all about climate. But again, I wouldn't say with confidence what is good and what is not. I do what I do. I know that we drive value. I mean, sitting here on stage with my portfolio company kind of makes me think that we've done something right.
Yeah, it's really good to know.
Yeah.
But also on my point, so I think some of these accelerators maybe have changed throughout the years as well. So when we went and applied to some, it came out that then once we started vetting them, that actually the previous few years hadn't been that great, or people in the team had changed. So I think it's really hard to give a current snapshot.
Yeah, I've thought of one. I thought of one good one, and I've heard feedback from my founders about it. I think it's a KPMG fundraising program. So it's a super short program, it's entirely virtual, and it's all geared towards making you more investable and putting you in touch with a number of investors. So yes, we've heard really good things about it.
Again, really, really niche one. I think from our experience from all of these 4 different accelerators, so 1, 2, 3. 3 were in Europe, 1 was in the Middle East. The really niche ones, actually, were the only ones that really delivered value. So I think that's basically one thing to consider is, if you're maybe super early, I might consider one of the better branded ones just for the PR, and then to figure out where you're going. But then once you're starting to actually know kind of the direction you need to go in, the niche ones are really do deliver value.
When you started your presentation saying there's 400 accelerators out there, so I remember when we launched the program first time, we wanted applicants. We just drove everyone to apply because it was a vanity start for us. We wanted over 100 applications, period. Then we got to review them, and that took forever. And then we had to write the no's. So we've entirely changed our strategy, how we approach startups. So I typically, if I find a company that is super early stage, but I know that they have potential, I will ask them to apply, but I would preempt it saying that you are unlikely to get in, but I want to have your data and I want to be helping you to position your company stronger for the next year's program.
Yep.
So even if you're earlier stage, have an opportunity to speak to people who are running the program or running an accelerator, because that would be helpful. And in every industry, you know what, you can be digital as hell. People buy from people.
Yeah.
And in exactly the same way, I will run an extra mile for our companies. And in exactly the same way, I build a relationship with the industry. Because I know that I can come and I can ask for favors.
Absolutely. I mean, there's probably more and more of these popping up. Maybe there's going to be 500 accelerators by the time we finish this chat. I don't know. Maybe the
By the way,
market downturn.
accelerator, in terms of business model, accelerators are not making money. So
Yeah.
by and large, it's quite an interesting stat that more often than not, and I'm going to tell you a far-fetched story, fashion technology people, sorry. So a friend of mine was running an accelerator for Farfetch when COVID hit.
Yep.
And when we were in lockdown, first thing that was cut was accelerator because it didn't bring money. Because it takes a long time for us to translate our investments into actual return.
Yeah. So especially, I think, relevant in terms of vetting all of these programs is it just a vanity project? Is it something that really, will deliver value, or will it
Does
get
it have a fund?
Yeah.
What sort of access are they offering you? Again, with us, when I talk about the National Association of Realtors, these guys have 80 bilateral partners in 100+ countries. So we approach the market from top down. And that's only on the resi side. And then we have like a bunch of industry partnerships that we wrap in and then hopefully package it to the value to our companies. So make sure you ask the right questions. 100% ask questions. If you can get introduced or have a warm intro to the VC. And the other thing that actually also kind of makes me think that we've done something right. Do you remember how we got connected? You were recommended by a VC for who you were too early.
Yeah, and I didn't remember that actually until now. And we had the interview in IKEA.
Yeah, exactly. So the best startups are coming actually as a VC referrals for us.
We're nearly out of time, so if there's any other questions, just ping them through the app. And I guess to summarize in terms of what to consider when looking at an accelerator or when you're thinking of applying to one, is it regional? Is it international? Is it regional to your country, to your region as in the Baltics or Europe as a whole? Is it global? And if it's global, is it truly global, or is it something that just uses it as a brand? Is it venture-backed? So do they take equity and give you actual money? Do they have Easter eggs in there, like warranties or future kind of rights of control, etc.? Is it remote? If it's remote, do you actually have time to put it in for remote? Is it hybrid? Is it local? Do you have the money to participate somewhere locally? So I actually, with the team, we lived in Dubai for a month to be able to do the acceleration program. And it was actually good for us. Stage of the companies that are in there and do the vetting, just like you would vet a VC. I really would thoroughly recommend properly calling companies that have participated in more than one. And then probably, ideally, even more than 3 to get a properly even picture of, okay, what was the value? Did you get it? Would you go back if you could? And then you can really make your mind up about it.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to us. That's our time.
Thank you.